Hello everyone, my name is Bob Foreman and I want to give you a little introduction to what you're going to be watching in the next 30 minutes. In July of 2014, LexisNexis released the HPCC version 5.0, and with it came some new capabilities with the built-in graph control that's part of the ECL Watch. And we decided to give our colleague over in Ireland a phone call, and he graciously allocated his time to demonstrate to us the new features and capabilities of this powerful graph control. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Gordon Smith, and he's going to, via a WebEx, demonstrate some various features and functions of the new 5.0 graph control. And you'll hear myself and my colleague Jim DeFabia occasionally asking Gordon some questions. This video is around 30 minutes long and it's packed with information, so you might want to have pencil and paper handy and take some notes. So again, thank you for joining us and enjoy the video.
Okay, can you see that?
See that? Perfect, thanks.
Alright, hang on, I'm just closing down a debug session there in the background and some other bits and pieces. Okay, the heat map, Bob, just so you know, it's this thing here.
Yes.
And all it is big and red indicates it took longer than something that's small and white. So as far as the graphs are concerned, graph 2, subgraph 6 is the time-consuming one. And just a couple of things here to note is when you click on one of these, you can see the left-hand side gets selected in sync.
Yes.
And the same is true sort of the other way around, although it can be a little bit harder to see and probably impossible to see. I'll go back to the one we had there. You can see it getting selected there. You can multi-select these bad boys as well, by the way.
Oh, that's great. Wow. So that's just a quick visual indicator of how much of a piece of the job it's taking up and how much time as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, you might look at this, and if your graph's running slow, you might say, okay, graph 1 there. And you can double-click where, I'm just going to double-click on that heat map there. And it's brought me to that subgraph. And,
let me what I know about graphs right now, Gordon, is, the ability to, when we're in this graph right here, you get, and you click on a process, you can actually take a look at the chunk of ECL code that's being executed or the pseudocode that's being executed. And then also you can look at the timings of that particular process. And then another important thing that I always stress to the developers is the skews. That, you kind of watch out for those skew percentages going plus and minus, that if you get a, start getting something that looks really big, then that means that one node is starting to do more of the work than other nodes, and you really need to think about that area of code and maybe redistributing your data. Am I correct so far with everything I said?
Yeah, now you won't see any skews today because I'm working on a one-node system, and by definition you can't get a skew on the one node. But absolutely, what you're saying there is pretty much correct. The graph itself isn't a representation of the running job. It is the running job, literally. So when the ECL is compiled down and optimized, the graph is produced at that point in time. The graph is then passed off to the various elements, whether it be a Thor, a HTHOR, or Roxy, and they literally use the graph as a playbook. So they will use that to run through the activities. The activities being the nodes on the graph. And then, so all your 400 nodes will be running through the same activity at the same time for the most part. So it's literally how the compiler has optimized your ECL and produced, and from that point of view, you might want to call it an execution graph, because it is exactly what's going to happen. Now, I don't have any particularly complicated graphs here. But what I've done is, now I assume you'll be making this video of 5.0 versus 5.02.
Yeah, well, right now that's the latest cluster that I've got is 5.0.
Yeah, there's only one minor difference, more to do with your initial graph experience. This window I've just opened, let me come back one. There's three modes of opening up graphs. You've got the default open, then you've got a tree mode, which I think in time will become the standard one, but it's something which I slipped into 5.0 late in the development cycle, so I didn't make it the default. And then you've got a safe mode. The safe mode's the same as the regular open, except for it doesn't reveal as much of the graph. It's designed for graphs that are so big it crashes the system or crashes the browser.
Right.
So if you have a graph that's either getting corrupted or is not displaying at all, then the next time you go to open it, use the safe mode.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it turns off a bunch of features like the curvy lines. It just does straight lines, and it tries its best, but it isn't foolproof. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up graph 1 here in the default view. We'll have a look at the tree mode later on. Now the first thing we are going to see, he says, for some reason that didn't pull down the data for me. Let me just refresh my page. Okay, there we go. Now, okay, so when you open up a graph, you end up in this view here, which is a little bit non-intuitive, and is something which I've changed for 5.02. And essentially all I've done in 5.02 is I'm defaulting to this view here. Now to get to that view here, you have to click on something in the overview. So when it says nothing selected there, what it's telling me is that you haven't selected anything in the overview. The logic behind doing it this way is for the bigger graphs, again, because they can be corrupted or they can take a long time to render, it just allows the user to step back a bit and say, okay, well, before I go into that, I'm going to, maybe just look at a smaller part of the graph by clicking on these other boxes.
Now you call the upper right, that's called the overview. What's the little pane in the lower right? What do you call that?
I call that the local view. And again, it's been subtly changed for 5.02, but essentially it's designed that when you click on an activity, that you get to see the local activities around it. So it's a bit more interesting if I click on, you can see where I clicked on this guy here, and then if you look over here in the local view, because these other subgraphs could be far away in the big view, they'll always be kind of brought closer together there, because I'm just showing I'm physically just, from him, I'm physically just counting out a distance of 2, 1, 2, 1 in each direction. So I'm displaying two activities coming into it, and 2 layers of activities coming out of it. And that's called the distance. That's the activity distance. And that is, you see this guy here? The little ruler? Okay, well the one here is the distance, like I just said. So if I wanted to increase that distance, maybe go out to 3 activities.
Okay.
Or 6. So now it's going back up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it ran out. But it's coming down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's kind of neat. Say you had an output. I'm just going to bring it all the way down to 0, just to make it super simple. But say I was looking at, say, this output here. If I wanted to see what was contributing to it, I could select it and then just slowly increase the distance to see what inputs were being used on that input, or for that output.
Very cool.
And that's very cool. Yeah, that's vaguely interesting. This one here might have been a better example, because you get for that output, you get a far simpler contributing graph. You can ignore all the other branches. So that's literally the graph flow to get you that output. So that's what I call the activity distance, and I'm just going to bring it back to the default, which is 2. It works also for edges. If I picked an edge here, it's gone out 2 activities either side. Same thing, that's with an activity and then just with an edge. While we're talking about distances, the other one I've got here is depth. This isn't a great example, but if I click on the left-hand side, if I click this guy here, if you had a lot of nested subgraphs, it's how far down, how many nested subgraphs are expanded by default. So say I had a subgraph down here somewhere, it would actually default to being collapsed with a depth of 2 because I've come down 2 levels and I'm not going to expand any more subgraphs. So it's another way to simplify a graph.
Yeah, especially if you have a real-world, very complex process. It helps you kind of divide and conquer what you're looking at.
Yeah, and it comes into its own. I mean, here you can see that it's essentially what we do on the overview. It's got I've limited the depth to 1 there, so the top level subgraphs are all collapsed.
Yes.
And I can do the same over here. I'll do that just for now. So inside my complicated graph, I've got a subgraph that's been collapsed, but if I click on it, then the local guy is going to display it. So that's where the local guy comes into play. So that's kind of how you get to navigate the bigger complicated graphs, is by playing with these things. Now while I'm in this local subgraph, I might be interested in, but this guy here and this guy here, as well as this guy, I'm actually interested in all 3 of those. So you can see I've done a multi-select.
Yes.
Now if I click on this guy here, which is sync to selection, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the local window. I'm going to resynchronize it to what I have selected there. And what that's now done is it's blown out those 3 guys. So that's exactly the same as me coming to my major graph and possibly picking on 1, 2, 3 different activities.
Right. Right.
But in that particular case, I was picking on 1, 2, 3 different subgraphs. And you can see in the local guy, it's actually collapsed down this guy here, but it's just picked the 3 I've selected. So again, you can build up, the view that you're actually interested in. Again, it's geared towards the bigger graphs.
Gotcha. Well, that's great. Now, all the stuff in the toolbar is really coming into focus now, and that's great. Gordon, I have a question for you, and I don't think it's ever been answered, or I never found it in the documentation. The individual shapes of each graph element, do they have, like, you have a circle sometimes you have a trapezoid, sometimes you have a square. What's the meaning behind those?
Each activity has a type. So, for example, sort would be one type, or a project would be another type. And all I've done is I've essentially just picked some shapes as I saw appropriate for the given types. And if we have a look at, I'm just going to zoom in here. Oh yeah, I should keep highlighting things. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here. If you want to zoom in using the mouse wheel, will scroll up and down like a web page. But if you press the control key, it will zoom in and out. Again, like a web page will zoom in and out. Well, not like a web page, but similar to. So an easy way to zoom in and out is to hold control key down and use a mouse wheel. And it will zoom into where the mouse is.
Well, that's great, Gordon.
So here we have, I'm trying to find a good shape. Yeah, like a project, I've kind of picked an upside down house shape there for the project, because what it's doing is it's taking files in, it's kind of, cleaning them up and taking them and spitting them out again. And again, for things like the group is sort of similar idea. So I've just picked shapes where I felt they were appropriate. And the ellipse is the default.
Gordon, is there a chart of these shapes?
There isn't a chart. I do have a list of the type IDs versus the shape name. Is about the best I can give you. The shapes, I tried to give unique shapes to things like sort and distribute, because they're kind of the ones you might want to see when you're zoomed all the way out. So these guys here, which are hexagons,
I guess
they're
maybe a better question. Are there a few that we might want to point out, like sort?
I don't think so. I think it's just something you'll get used to when you're using it. I'm not sure if they're a big deal, but I can certainly point you where the list is, and all the names of them are descriptive. Okay, back to navigating. I mentioned that the wheel it scrolls up and down, and the control key down zooms in and out. Double clicking will zoom to fit. And and it'll recenter whatever you're double clicking on. And then I'll come back up to the navigation bar where I'm sure you've worked out that the 1-to-1 zooms to 100%. This one here is a zoom to fit, and this one here is a zoom to width. The zoom to width is quite nice for those long, skinny ones, because you can do that, and then using the mouse wheel, you can go up and down the entire graph really quickly.
I see right next to those zoom buttons that you've got the refresh button and then a forward and a back button.
That's right. I was about to show you the forward and the back. The back, they're working pretty good now because I'm pressing the back button for everything we've done for the entire session we're in. Not a whole heap in the main one, but if I come down to this guy here, you can see all the little, remember those little distance changes we made?
Mm-hmm.
You can see all of those in play there now.
So it's a playback history.
Yeah,
what's the difference between
the
refresh, the refresh that's the lower refresh and the one above it?
When you say the lower refresh, oh, okay, yeah, I'll talk about that. This refresh here reruns the layout algorithm on what you're seeing. Now, 99.9% of the time, that will do nothing for you. It'll give you the same layout that you just had.
Mm-hmm.
In the 0.1% of the time, you may have got a corrupted layout. You know, have you ever seen the graphs where the subgraphs are overlapping and the lines look terrible?
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally it can help in that scenario.
So that lower refresh is really a redraw?
It's a recalculate the layout.
Okay. And the refresh above
The refresh above it goes to the server and typically gets the latest counts and the latest version of the graph for a running work unit.
Okay. So those are no longer live?
No, they are live, and the counts do get updated for running ones, and the refresh button, in keeping with the refresh button on all the other pages, lets you, rather than waiting the 30 seconds or the minute or the couple of minutes for the next refresh to come through, lets you go and fetch them straight away. All of the work units refresh automatically while they're running, but they refresh on a degrading timescale. So if I've just submitted a work unit, it'll start off refreshing every second, and then it drops down to every 5 seconds, then every 30 seconds, then every minute. And I think every minute is probably the longest wait. Or it could be every 2 minutes, I can't remember. But the degrading refresh scale is identical in New ECL Watch as it is in the IDE. The IDE does exactly the same thing. And I think it's a nice balance of when you're interested in the quick refreshes. Typically the first time you look at a running work unit, it does that, but then it slows down over time because it will continue to work even in the background. Now the find, while I'm up in this toolbar, I'm going to find all my torques. And what it does is it highlights it finds them, and then even in the main graph, what it's done is it's done the localized graph view based on a selection of all the found items. So you can see it found 2 and it's gone out a distance of 2 in each direction. And it's highlighted them. And then the next logical thing you can do is you can click through them. Now if you're along, I'm going to do another search on E, because I'll find a lot more. Okay? But now as you click through next, it'll actually walk you through each of the found items. So you can, locate the one you're interested in. So it's find next and find previous. Sorry, that's really what they are. Now, the next thing, so I think that's all the navigation items covered there, yeah? Now next, I just, some of these, you've seen that the selections synchronize between the windows. If I click on Inline Data, it syncs everything. Not only does it sync between the graphs, but it also syncs between these other views of the data. So if I look at my list of subgraphs, 1, 8, 11 and 21, if I click on 8 here, you'll see that number 8 got selected in there.
Yep.
So of course the opposite is true. If I click on number 1 here, and multi-select, it works the other way around.
Okay.
Okay. The same is true with activities. So if I come back and do my E-search here, not only has it highlighted them all in the graphs, it's also highlighted them here in the activity list.
Oh, that's excellent. Edges, yep.
Yeah, edges are there. The search doesn't search edges, but again the same rules apply. You know, if I highlight two edges there, they're going to get highlighted in the main graph. So now if we come back to your skew comment, now I won't have any skews here because I'm on a one node system, but let's say for example I wanted to sort on count. I can click on that, I can then scroll down to find the largest count. It was 500,000. This would be you on your skew. Now skew sorting wouldn't be great, but if I click on that now, I've now found the edge with, you know, the corresponding skew of 1,000.
Okay, great.
Or if I want to, I'm going to sort by labels just to see what labels I have. I've got a right label there. And then finally, we've got the same timing map that you saw previously, the same heat map, except for it's only showing the items, the subgraphs, which are relevant to this main graph. So again, you can, all the same rules apply. You can select here, you can double click, and you can multi-select.
Gordon, would you use a heat map, say you had some pretty complicated ECL and it's a job that's taking a long time? Would you go to your heat map and find the hottest one and maybe look at optimizing that code? Would that be
I mean that
possible
that would certainly be. I mean, if you're looking at an entire work unit and you want to locate the subgraphs which are taking the longest, absolutely. I mean that's exactly what you're going to do. And you wouldn't do it here. You would do it on the timings. You do it on the timers page. And you would see that, okay, in graph 2, subgraph, this guy here actually took the longest. So I'll double click that, and boom, it brought me straight there. Then I think the only thing well, there's two things we haven't touched on. One would be the properties, which is the same as it's always been. So it's just going to display whatever I select, the properties for whatever I select. These properties here are identical to the line item here, except you have to scroll left, right. You know, if I pick this guy, so all these values here are just, you know, this row's data formatted in a table. Yeah, the same is true in the for the edges as well, except for the formatting's a little bit better here. Well, that's debatable. What else? I think that's kind of it for this one.
The advanced drop-down.
The advanced drop-down. Yeah, do not use unless you've been told to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's mostly for me actually in here.
Well, we'll just...
I'm trying to think. Yeah, it really is for me. I mean, I can go in here and I can hack some of the dot language directly. So if I want to, I can make this, instead of being top-bottom, I can make it a left-right graph. And if I redo this layout, you can have a graph that goes that way if you want. Yeah, no, that is the only time it actually. The main reasons I might use it would be the edit XGMML will get me the XGMML, and that's a two-way street. Have you ever, remember we used to pass, I've been emailed XGMML in the past, yeah? Saying that this graph doesn't render. And what I do is I come in here and I just simply paste it in here now.
Right.
So hang on, if you bear with me, I've got a folder where I keep nasty XGMMLs, not too big. So what I can do is I'm just going to paste in some nasty XGMML, click apply. Yeah. I'm still in left-right mode, but yeah, it's a... Okay, it's not nasty X. It's a recursion test I was using for depth. Alright, not to worry. Anyway, you can do that. You can paste it in. I'm going to just put my graph back to normal.
So you showed us briefly before the tree mode.
Okay, yeah.
And
well,
I find the tree mode very interesting.
Yeah, I like the tree mode. I think it's going to be the long-term winner. Before I show that to you, because it is completely, well, not completely, it is different, I'm just going to open up in the safe mode. Okay, so if you look at what it does when you open in safe mode, is first of all, it's hidden to the graphs by default, and it's up to you to start selecting parts of the really big, enormous graph that was causing you problems in the first place. So what it's done really is it's reduced these two guys to 0, 0 and reduced him to 0, and it's only opening up the main graph with a depth of 1. So it's as shallow as possible pretty much. So it's just to let the guys get in and maybe view a really big graph and then let them drill into it without it crashing, that's all.
Okay, yeah, and the letter S up there identifies it as safe mode, I assume.
Yeah. Then finally the tree mode. And again, so nothing is selected. You only get one graph in this view, but you also get a tree structure of your graph here. And the nice thing is because it's sorted by the ID number, that's also the same order it gets executed in. If you click on the root graph, you're going to see the same graph again. That's going to show you it all down to a depth of 2. Okay, but now you can click on, you know, maybe I'm interested in these activities here. So it's a simpler version, and you get your properties down here in the one view. So it's a simpler version of the other screen, but you've still got all the same functionality. It's a mixture. This one graph on the right can be a combination of the overview graph, the main graph, or the local graph, depending on what you've selected. Alright? And all those other lists that we had previously in the top right are still here. So you've got your activity, or your subgraphs list, you've got your activity list, you've got your edge list, and you've got your heat map. So you haven't lost anything. It's a simpler view, but in my opinion, it's kind of more powerful, I think. Other no tooltips? Yeah, if you jar that. The first one's the tree. The second one is the subgraphs. It's meant to be a list of folders, whereas that's a tree of folders. Then you've got a list of white boxes, which is a list of activities. Then you've got a list of lines, which is the list of edges. And then you've got the thing that looks like that, the heat map.
The heat map, okay.
There's one little slightly not intuitive thing. If you right click on the tree here, you can actually say for the tree I don't want to display the activities, and you can say I want to collapse all or I want to expand all. Again, that's kind of useful for the bigger nested graphs.
Okay.
And again, it's identical to the other graph from a functionality point of view. You know, I can search for all my E's, except for now you can see they've all been selected within my tree view. So, as far as a web page goes, it's a simpler web page, but I think you've got all the same functionality, and it's a better use of real estate. So that's about it, and that's my what is that? That's my 25-minute overview. And you guys know about this guy here, open a new page, yeah? And you know, if you right click it, you can go copy link address, which is very handy. So, well, here, let me come back to a real example. Let me just come back to my server, because that's one of the things which won't work with server IP. But I'm going to pick a graph here, and I'm like, Bob, I really want you to have a look at this graph here for me. So I can right click here, copy link address, and I can email that to you. You come along, you come in here, you paste it in, and you're there at that particular page.
I love that.
Yeah, it's exactly like open new page, except for you can just do it without leaving the page. Yeah, that works everywhere that guy is.
All right, Gordon, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it again, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Okay.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, Bob.
All right, cheers, guys.
All right.
Bye.
All right, take care.